Hey everyone, my name is Janet and I'm going to talk with you today about how to start a successful garden here in Prescott, Arizona. But first, I want to tell you about the seed library that the wonderful librarians at the Prescott Public Library, Kathleen and her team with the Prescott Farmers Market, and myself, owner of Prescott Gardener, were launching in March. We started the seed library to inspire our community to experience the pleasure of gardening by providing access to seeds and the knowledge needed to grow a successful garden at home. We're also providing resources on how to save that seed to grow more regionally adapted gardens in the future. Check out the seed library page on the Prescott Public Library website, and we're excited to work with you on this. So today we're going to talk about three main steps on how to start a garden. We're going to talk about site selection, building the garden, and watering practices. So grab a notepad and think of any questions you have along the way, and we're going to do a live question and answer when I'm finished. First, we're going to talk about site selection. So keep in mind, you're going to want to look out for the orientation of your property. Which direction is north, south, east, and west? With that, your goal is to get 6 hours of direct sunlight in your garden in the summertime. If you're considering having a winter garden, anything that's casting a shadow, such as trees, your house, and fences and such, are going to have longer shadows in the winter time. So your goal is good sunlight in the summer, and if you're trying to grow in the winter, plenty of light for the winter time as well. Here in Arizona, it gets really hot in the summertime, so providing a break in the afternoon sun will give your plants much greater success of thriving. So having a house or a tree or something to the western side of your garden will be perfect. Not ideal, but it is awesome. The next thing we're going to talk about is flow. So what I mean by that is placing the garden in an area where you're already occupying. So coming and going from the house or a backyard that you're utilizing already. What I don't really recommend is putting the garden in either a hard to access place or an area that off to the side of the house that you're not really going to for any other reason. This doesn't apply to everyone, but many people, if the garden's out of sight, it will also generally be out of mind. I find that it's easy to, just walk past the garden and then you remember, oh, I have to turn the irrigation up, or I have to turn it down, or remembering to seed and plant things in a timely manner. So location, keep that in mind as well when you're choosing your location. So the other thing is how much space you have to work with, and just keeping in mind you want room to plant and have your garden, but you also want nice, generous pathways to bring in a wheelbarrow and your tools and be able to carry 5-gallon buckets. Access is really important in a garden. Some people will do narrow pathways, but just keep in mind it'll be harder to maneuver when you're trying to work in there. If you're going to do a larger garden, I would recommend considering truck access. So if you're bringing in truckloads of compost and manure and such to amend your gardens in the summertime, or if you're adding wood chips to the ground as mulch, being able to back a truck up at least close to the garden is going to make it a lot easier to bring that material in. So the next thing we're going to talk about is watering. So I want you to locate your spigots, or if you have an existing wall timer, either of those will work great for your vegetable garden. If you're working off of a spigot, you can either use a hose, we'll go into more of this later, a hose or a spigot timer, or you can use your existing wall timer and tie into an open line on that. You may need to talk with your irrigation person or try and figure that out on your own. So next we're going to talk about fencing. We have a lot of critters in our area that would love to get into the vegetable garden. So that includes javelina, deer, rabbits, you name it. Ideally, a 6-foot tall fence will be great, and it'll keep most things out except for the most determined deer. So something solid and pulled taut so that the javelina can't dig and use their noses to get underneath it. I've seen that happen a lot with wire fencing. Another thing to consider is that with wire fencing, deer can actually step onto it and climb up and into the garden. I've seen that happen too. So cattle panels, though they're only 4 feet tall, will deter the javelinas from getting in there. You can fasten them with T-posts to keep them in the ground. I think it's a great material to use. Another thing, if you're not wanting to fence your entire garden or your property is what we did here before we had a fence. Was we had framed this up so it's a greenhouse in the wintertime and garden beds in the summertime. And we wrapped it with hardware cloth. You could use chicken wire, and that kept javelina and other free-ranging critters out of the garden before we got the fence up. Lastly, I want you to consider the size of your garden. Some people will look at their yards and think, I can have a huge garden here. If you're new to gardening in Arizona or new to gardening in general, I highly recommend you start small and then add on to that in the years to come. You want it to be something that you can manage and enjoy, but not have it get to be too much to take care of. So some other things to consider with that are how many people live in your household who can help you take care of the garden, how many people are going to be harvesting and eating from the garden, but also maybe you want to grow some extra food that you can give out to your neighbors and your friends and donate to food banks. Or you'd want to preserve your harvest at the end of the season, which is something I love to do, and you can enjoy it throughout the winter. Think about how much time that you have to maintain your garden on a week-to-week basis. And the more realistic with this that you are, the more successful you're going to be. A garden really does require nurturing. You want to be able to have time to check on your plants, make sure that they're doing well, checking for pests, adding mulch, and so on and so forth. So be realistic with that and you'll be on a good path to a successful garden. So next we're going to talk about building the garden, and I'm going to focus on 3 types of garden beds that you can build. First, we're going to talk about in-ground beds. This is the cheapest option, and what's required is digging down about 12 inches into your soil, working out any of those rocks. If you've dug around here, you know we have plenty, and really working in a lot of compost into that soil. I'll go into more detail on soil in a minute. So one challenge that you can come up against with that, different parts of town are more prone to this than others. Gophers can be a big challenge. You've probably seen their holes come up in your landscape, but they can wreak havoc on the garden. So my recommendation for getting rid of the gophers is to trap them. Not everyone loves that concept, but it will be the most effective at controlling your gopher population. I really strongly deter people from using poisons because those gophers can get eaten by other things such as owls, birds, potentially your dog. You just don't want to be using poisons in your landscape for any kind of pest control. The next kind of garden bed that you can choose from is a raised bed. It's what I use often in garden installations. It's what I use at my house. And there are a lot of benefits to using these. There's different styles you can use as well. Most commonly is the classic wooden framed raised bed. We have other options here such as the redwood with the corrugated metal. The stock tanks are wonderful. They're very fast installation. Just make sure you cut the base out so that it has proper drainage. So the benefits to using raised beds is that you can line the bottom with hardware cloth and the gophers can't get in. And I say hardware cloth because chicken wire, which although it's cheaper, that will rust within a couple years and the gophers can chew through it quite easily. You can find hardware cloth at any of our farm supply stores. So the other benefits with raised beds is that it's easier on your back, and it's you can also add your ideal soil blend to them. So you can go to any of our local materials yards and ask for the soil that they provide that's for vegetable gardens. So around town it's referred to as planter's mix, super soil is what I've heard mostly. And so they're going to tell you that it's already amended with compost, which it is, but I'm going to tell you to add more compost to that because your vegetables are heavy feeders. And you really do also want to increase the organic matter in the soil for more water retention. And again, I'll go into more of that in a little bit. So the next style of garden bed that I'm going to talk about are raised beds, and there are lots of options and directions to take that. The least expensive option is probably to use just Doug fir or pine. Though they're not rot-resistant woods, I do find that they last quite a while here. I have 2 beds in my house. One is 16 feet long, and it's been there for 8 years and it's still standing. So the next option would be to use cedar or redwood. These are really beautiful. They're going to hold up for a significantly longer time, and though they're more expensive on the front end, those are naturally rot resistant. So it's an excellent wood. Those are both excellent options to work with. Some other styles of raised beds are like the ones we have here. These are redwood with corrugated metal. It's a fun design. They're beautiful. They hold up nicely. And then another option are these stock tanks. They're galvanized stock tanks. You can find them at our farm supply stores in town. They do sell out quickly. So what I recommend with those is you or find someone who's comfortable doing this to cut the base out, leaving several inches along the edge, or just to cut a large hole in the bottom, because what you don't want to do is just put some holes in the base and expect that to drain enough. Oftentimes when I've seen people put these in, they tell me that they are counting on the little drain hole in the bottom to drain them, or they've put some holes in the bottom and think that that's sufficient, and then the beds get super waterlogged, especially when monsoons start. So cut out the base. With all of the raised beds, what's really awesome is that you can line the bottom with hardware cloth, and I recommend hardware cloth over chicken wire because chicken wire has the tendency to rust in about 2 years under the ground, and then the gophers can also chew through it pretty easily. So the hardware cloth is a larger gauge wire, and they're not going to be able to get through that. Another benefit about the raised beds is you can put in your ideal soil mix rather than starting with our native soil. So with that, I recommend going to any of the materials yards in town and asking to check out whatever kind of soil they have and recommend for vegetable gardening. I've heard it referred to as planter's mix, super soil, but call around and see what looks good to you. They will tell you that it has compost in it. And I'm going to tell you to add compost to that because you really want to increase the organic matter in your soil from the get-go. And I'll go into soil in a minute, but it is the foundation of a successful garden. One more benefit of the raised beds is that they're higher off the ground, so they're going to be easier to work in. And again, it's just making the garden more accessible. So lastly, another way to approach your garden is to use containers. So that's planter pots, found materials. You can actually Google pictures of container gardens and you come up with some really wacky images of what people create gardens out of. But what I love is that you can actually move those containers around and put them into more sun or less sun. I think they're a wonderful way to start to familiarize yourself with plants and how they grow and what they need. So with those, you're going to want to use an organic potting soil. And the better quality, the better it's going to be for your plants. You are going to be feeding those throughout the summer because watering them frequently is going to flush the nutrients out of the soil. Another thing to consider with the container garden is that watering is going to be very frequent because those small containers have a tendency to dry out really quickly. With that said, using glazed pots are going to help keep the moisture in, whereas terracotta and stuff, whereas using terracotta, the terracotta has a tendency to wick the moisture out of the pot, and you're going to be watering very frequently. I would just recommend using something that has a glaze on it. So another benefit of container gardening is that if you are renting and you're not allowed to go dig up the soil outside, or you're not necessarily allowed to go put in a garden bed, or you don't want to invest in that where you're renting, the container garden is very easy to move and you can take those pots with you to your next home. The next thing to consider when you're building your garden is creating generous pathways, and I encourage people to do around 2.5 feet for a pathway so that you can easily maneuver your wheelbarrow and carry 2 5-gallon buckets and bring all your tools in and be able to just work in the garden and move around comfortably. I mentioned earlier that soil is the foundation of a successful garden, and each one of these garden beds is going to require different soil types. When you're installing an in-ground garden, really you're just adding as much organic matter as you can to the existing native soil. So that's compost, composted manure, working those rocks out, and you're good to go. So with the raised bed, I mentioned the planter's mix or super soil. Around town you can find that at the materials yards, and adding plenty of compost to that. Something that I've seen happen before is people will put in raised beds and then use a bagged potting soil, or sometimes it's even labeled as a raised bed planters mix that you can find in bags at farm supply stores. I don't recommend using that. First of all, it's going to be more expensive. Second of all, your plants won't be happy in the potting soil in these raised beds. It doesn't actually have the right soil structure to be successful in a raised bed, but it'll be perfect for a container garden. So I strongly encourage you put the effort in on the front end to build really good soil before the growing season starts, because that's going to be the foundation that gives you a successful garden. Keep in mind that each year you can build those soils using good soil building practices, adding compost, organic amendments and fertilizers, and keeping mulch on your garden as well will help with that. I use mulch to help protect the soil from strong sun, wind, evaporation, and also that mulch is going to break down to help build stronger soil life. Straw, some people use pine needles. I wouldn't use wood chips because those wood chips actually draw the nitrogen out of the soil. Straw is wonderful. I would use straw. It's easy to find at our local feed stores, and it's relatively affordable as well. Adding quality compost and aged manure to your garden is going to increase the organic matter, as I mentioned before, which is going to help retain moisture in your soil, which is incredibly important here in Arizona. So it will also increase the biological diversity in the soil, which in turn will help create stronger plants that are going to be able to survive drought and be more pest resistant throughout the season as well. So each year, add compost, organic amendments, and organic fertilizers to your garden. Vegetables, as I said earlier, are heavy feeders, and you're going to want to make sure that they're properly fed in order to thrive. So you can use pre-mixed fertilizers that have a good mix of what the plants will need for the season, or you can find individual amendments that will increase vegetative growth or increase flower and fruit production. Learning to read your plants and understand what they need will help guide you as to what fertilizers and amendments to use. Again, if you're going to be vegetable gardening, use organic. Chemical fertilizers actually damage the soil life, and we really want to avoid that in all cases. I highly recommend A Greener World Supply Company in Prescott if you're looking for fertilizers and amendments. Go up there and talk to the folks. They're really knowledgeable, and they have a huge selection of things to choose from. Explain that you're doing some organic vegetable gardening, and they'll probably be able to help you up there. So another option is homemade compost. I encourage anyone with a garden, or even if you don't have a garden, to be composting your kitchen scraps, your landscape scraps. If you have a garden, you're going to be producing a lot of scrap throughout the season. And producing that into a compost that you can use in your garden is the most incredible soil conditioner. It's going to provide the plants with exactly what they need, and I highly recommend it. So lastly, I want to talk about your watering options for your garden. That would be hand watering or irrigation. And hand watering has its benefits. It's really suitable for small gardens and container gardens. And it particularly suits people who are going to be around for the whole season and they have time to hand water their garden in the morning. One issue, if you're going on vacation or something, you're going to want to find someone to hand water your garden, which can be tricky or easy. Your other option for watering is to install an irrigation system. You can either get a spigot timer for your spigot that's near the garden and just install a super simple watering system. Or you can come off of your existing irrigation wall timer if you have any spare lines on that. Keeping in mind that you don't want to tie into your landscape lines because it's going to have different watering requirements than what your landscape plants are going to want. I encourage everyone to use drip lines and drip emitters in the garden. You want to avoid sprinklers because you can lose a lot of water that way. Plants also don't love to be sprayed with water, the city water all the time. And those are really nice because if you're leaving for a long weekend or even a week, you can know that your garden is going to have its basic watering needs met, but I would still encourage someone, if you're leaving for a while, to come by and just check to make sure that it's running properly without any leaks. So that's all the information that I think you need to get a good head start on a successful garden here in Prescott. And if you have questions, tune into the Q&A that's following this, and I look forward to chatting with you. I also want to add that Slow Food Prescott is doing a garden chat every first and third Tuesday of the month from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And you can get in touch with Molly Beverly or Slow Food Prescott to get on the sign-up list for that. It's via Zoom, and it's a wonderful resource, and it's a great way to meet other local gardeners in the area. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, for all that great information.
You're welcome.
So let's see if anybody has some questions. So somebody asked, what is the best kind of tomato to grow in Prescott?
So many to choose from. Yeah, so I would say, all kinds of tomatoes do well here, from beef steaks to cherry tomatoes. Some of the larger varieties I really like are Abe Lincoln and Cherokee Purple. Paste tomato, a wonderful one is San Marzano. Cherries that do well, Sun Golds, Black Cherry, which are actually in the seed library. Sweet 100s do well. Kathleen, do you have favorites?
I think you named all mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody asks, what was the first plant you ever planted?
Ooh. Let's see. I had a hibiscus that I nurtured for a long time. It was a house plant, but outside I started tomatoes from seed. Classic. Yeah.
Okay. Can you use the same potting soil in containers from last year? If so, what do you need to amend the soil?
So that's a really good question. So what I like to do with that is I like to dump it out onto a tarp and take out any roots and leaves, anything remaining from the season before. And I actually like to get another bag of potting soil just to work into that. And then you can find a balanced fertilizer. Dr. Earth makes a really good all-purpose organic blend, and use their recommendations on the bag for any of the fertilizers that you're using to amend that. You can also add some compost and worm castings. Yeah.
Thank you. And then what about soaker hoses? With a big garden, drips don't seem practical.
Yeah, so soaker hoses work well. One issue that you can sometimes come up against with those is that the mineral deposits can really build up and reduce the amount of water that comes out of them. So soaker hoses were, I would say for a larger garden, I would talk to Pro Water and just see what they would recommend for something on a larger scale. Drip tape is also a good product to use on a larger scale.
Okay, thank you.
Ruthie, I've got a couple questions from the chat box.
Yep.
Someone asked what the name of the place you suggested was in town, if you could repeat it, Janet.
Oh, it's called Pro Water. I know that they're, Pro Water Irrigation and Supply Company. And they are over by Fry's on, is it Willow? It's Willow Creek. And I think they're moving locations onto 6th Street.
The soil amendment stuff as well, or were they just water focused?
The soil amendment is going to be a greener world supply company. And they're out kind of by the dump, like in that area of town, but they're wonderful up there. They're super knowledgeable. They love to talk about gardening with people, and they have so much to choose from. So if you're looking for amendments locally, which I recommend, they're going to have a lot to choose from.
Cool. We also have someone was asking, how deep should the soil be in a raised garden bed?
Great question. So I would say I would recommend 12 to 18 inches minimum. You can go up from there. 3 feet's kind of excessive. 2 feet is, at like a good height. You're going to get some depth to your soil. with lining the beds and everything, it makes it anything shallower, say 6 inches or so. If you do have lining, gophers can still come in and get those roots of, say, like your carrots and things like that. So I would say 12 to 18 inches, 2 feet's great too.
Okay, somebody asks, when is a good time to start your garden?
Now, so I would start building the garden. I mean, the sooner the better. In the spring, we have such lovely weather right now. If you're local, it's a wonderful time to get going with that. Just so that as the season progresses and it starts to warm up even more, and spring is just around the corner, you can start seeding your springtime crops.
Okay, what are good plants for children to help grow, and any advice on gardening with kids?
Yeah. So I used to actually work at a preschool in town that had gardens all over the place. So, I like to ask them what they're interested in growing. If you see them drawn towards cucumbers or carrots, getting in the seed catalogs is a great way to have them like flip through. They get to pick things out. But I would say it's kind of based on what they're interested in, and then having them participate in as much of it as you can, from amending the gardens to planting. Composting is a really fun activity to get in there with the worms. And there are some really good resources as well with all of, getting kids into the garden more. Yeah.
Speaking from
Kathleen.
experience,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Carrots are really great, but I always really struggle with carrots personally. They're like always end up like this big, so I just buy mine at the farmer's market. But I think, yeah, like Janet said, anything kids are excited about. The best thing that I found is sugar snap peas, which we also have in the library. If you want to check them out next week, literally check them out. And they're great. You should plant them right now. They'll kind of come up when they want. They can handle a little frost and really cold weather. They really like cool weather. So come, mid-May, they're going to start to go downhill. So it's a really great time to plant those, and kids love them. And so plant a ton, because they're always going to be out there picking them off the plants.
Yeah, those are good. So speaking of the seed library, somebody asked for more information on that. There are, seed packets that you're able to check out from the library. You will need a library card, but there's 25 different varieties, mostly vegetables, but some fruits and herbs and flowers as well. And the library will be opening on Monday to 7 days a week. So just come by. It's on the second floor, and it's kept in an old card catalog, and you can, pick what seeds you want. And we also have a web page for that, prescottlibrary.info/seed-library. And the librarians here are happy to help as well. You can call us at 777-1526.
Nice.
Ruthie, I've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to answer them. Someone was asking what are the easiest vegetables to grow, Janet?
I would say tomatoes are pretty forgiving, specifically cherry tomatoes. Once they get going, even if they're super stressed, they're going to produce a lot. They do very well here. I would, let's see, peppers do well. Again, sticking with smaller varieties like jalapenos, sweet peppers. We have a miniature sweet, as kind of like a bell pepper in the seed library. Thai chilies do really well. And then if you want to step out of the nightshades, the greens do really well. Lettuce grows very well here in the springtime. Start it kind of in March. You're going to want to protect it if it's outside. And I could go on. Herbs do really well in our really hot, dry climate. So that's another whole, yeah. Basil. Yeah.
Any tips about growing strawberries or raspberries?
Okay. Yes. So strawberries, they're going to want plenty of sun, but they are okay to have a little like dappled shade here. I battled the slugs and snails in my garden with our strawberries. And actually someone gave me a wonderful little bit of advice last summer, and that was to use a grapefruit rind and place it in there. And at night they all gravitate towards it, and then you can just remove them. And it worked very well. And And then raspberries, they're going to want a good amount of sun to be fed. And then also pruning the right way is also helpful with that, you know. So that, and then feeding also, they're also going to want to be fed. And they're both, you know, some bone meal would be good, and an all-purpose fertilizer as well. It's useful. Oh, and also I'm going to add to that alfalfa meal, which you can actually get at feed stores. And usually it comes in like a pellet form, so you can soak it and it breaks up. But anything in the rose family, strawberries, fruit trees, raspberries and such are going to really enjoy that, the alfalfa meal as an amendment in there.
Okay, what is the best way to get rid of bugs or insects that have attacked plants such as green bean or pepper plants?
Gotcha. So it really depends on what your pests are. Aphids are really common here. So that I'm imagining, you know, with pepper plants, it might be what they're referring to. So for those, I would, you know, use your hose to really like, you know, focus in on the plant and just spray it off, and kind of, you can use your hands to rub them off and everything, and just get them off the plant physically as best as you can. And then just keep that up for a while, kind of checking on it. And then you can also use neem oil. You can dilute it if it's a concentrate, or sometimes it just is good to go. Read the label for that. And that's an organic, it's an oil that just, they don't like. And so, yeah, that would be my recommendation. Kathleen?
I was going to just say a great source for neem oil. Margaret at One Root downtown.
Yeah, definitely.
Summit and Gurley. She usually has some, and she can give you a whole printout about it, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
In addition to bottling it for you in whatever size you want.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
We've had a couple questions about starting seeds inside, and we're so glad you're
Cool.
asking, because next month, on the 27th of March, Janet's going to be doing a how to start seeds indoors class, similar to this one. It'll be, that will be live. It won't be a video. So if you want to come back for that, we'd love to have you come back and learn how to do it, you know, hands-on, along with Janet. So.
Yeah, and if you want to get set up with that, you know, look around your house. If you have a south-facing window that you're willing to, you know, convert to a seed starting station for the spring, you know, that's one method. And then also, if you don't have a good south-facing window, the shop up the hill, Greener World Supply Company, they do have lights, and you can set up a station in. But light is really important. Oftentimes you see a lot of leggy starts in the springtime. And having supplemental light, if you need it, is definitely recommended. And we'll go in, you know, like Kathleen said, we'll go into more detail on seed starting inside in a month.
Okay, so for the Netafim or drip irrigation line, how many GPM for vegetables?
Gallons per minute. So I guess the way I would approach answering that is I like to use the 6-inch drip emitter line. So that's every 6 inches, there's going to be a little emitter inside the line. And I would set it around 4 minutes twice a day can be good. Or you can do 6 minutes just in the morning. And again, you're gonna want to water early in the morning here, just so that it really gets a chance to soak into the ground and doesn't really evaporate as much. But I would say 4 to 6 minutes. I see some people run it for 15 and more, and that can just kind of be too much. Your plants might look a little waterlogged, you know, showing yellow and pale, and so yeah.
Someone's asking where the seeds come from for the seed library, so I can answer that. This time around, we purchased from some companies, Johnny's Seed, Selected Seed, which is a national company that supplies a lot of farmers, and also Seed Savers Exchange, which is a nonprofit that does really amazing work in making sure that there's a lot of diverse seeds, and that they're saving heirloom seeds from all over. So we purchased those, but eventually we'd really love for local farmers and expert gardeners to be saving those seeds for the future so that we can supply seeds from our area for the seed library. But that might take a couple seasons and maybe even a couple of years to figure out. So in the meantime, we've ordered some bulk seeds, and then we had volunteers package them up. So I took a lot of time to package them up. We're really excited about it.
Okay, somebody is asking if potatoes can be grown here, and if so, how deep should they be planted?
Definitely. So I would work those in about 6 inches into the soil, and just let them do their thing. You can also do, I mean, for those of us that have in-town lots that aren't as big, a potato tower is a wonderful thing to construct. You can use, you can buy potato towers, but you can also build them out of wire. And, you know, so the idea with that is that you build a cylinder and then you layer some straw and some soil, some material so that it can really drain well. And then you plant your seed potatoes in there, and then you add some more soil. You can add a little more straw. The straw helps kind of aerate it, and just keep that watered. And so the vines, they're going to grow up and they're going to grow out the sides of the cages, and you just keep adding soil and straw and material on top of that. So it's going to keep on growing up. And then at the end of the season, or when it's time to harvest in the summer, you're going to actually take that unit apart, and you can push the soil down onto a tarp and harvest your potatoes that way. So that's the potato towers are a nice option for small space. Yeah, they're great.
What herbs are best to grow in Prescott, and also what vegetables and fruits are best to grow?
Wonderful. Okay, so oregano and thyme and lavender all do really well here. Rosemary does very well here. Will get very big in your garden. And yeah, basil does very well. I like to grow all types of basil. Dill does well. Fennel. Cilantro does very well. Epazote is a wonderful one as well. It's got a really interesting flavor to it. Yeah, and then there's a whole actual list of medicinal herbs as well that do very well in our climate. Lemon balm, and yeah, so that's another whole. Then vegetables, was it? And fruits.
Fruits and vegetables.
Okay. Raspberries and blackberries do very well. Grapes do very well here. And if they're planted in the right spot, they're going to want plenty of sun. I mean, vegetables, it's, thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, vegetables. So, I mean, I really haven't, I guess I would say I would go more with the approach of like, a lot does really well here. Things that can be more challenging here is, I guess, is how I would go about that, is cabbage, broccoli, things in the cabbage family can be, you know, not quite, collards do really well here. But what would you say, Kathleen, as far as, I mean, I guess all the stuff that we're stocking in the seed library does well here. Yeah, chard, greens, anything in the nightshade family. Yeah, melons can do well. You're gonna want to look for like a drought tolerant variety, because, you know, if you think of like a big watermelon, those are gonna require a lot of water. Yeah.
Janet, let's mention zucchini or crookneck squash. Any of the summer squashes are like, we're tired of them because once they start producing, they literally grow like inches a day. And so you might this one, and then
you'll find them in your garden
coming out here. So there's actually a national put a zucchini on your neighbor's porch day in August because everyone you'll have a ton of zucchini, which is great in the summer. So it's a really easy plant to grow.
Yeah. Beans do really well here also. Yeah. Radishes.
Okay, somebody had asked what was the name of the nursery that you recommended?
I don't know if I recommended a specific nursery. I think honestly, all of our nurseries in town are wonderful, and they do a great job kind of there's a wide selection of stuff to choose from. There's Native Garden. We really like them, and Waters does a beautiful job, and Mortimer's Nursery as well. They have a lot of materials outside as well, like the planters mix over there, and trees to choose from, and yeah.
Okay, what material was used for your door in the greenhouse?
Oh, that was it's called Solex. It's a greenhouse siding product. It's a double walled like poly. And it does well. It's more opaque. It's not see-through, so it doesn't create sharp shadows in the greenhouse. You can look up the product online. It's called Solex, Solex. And that is also what goes around the siding of the greenhouse. We just didn't take the door panel off.
Somebody asked about coffee grounds and if they can
Nice.
be used in your compost.
Definitely. Yeah, there's kind of the myth that they cause acidity, like they cause the soil to become more acidic, but not quite the case. I mean, I wouldn't add more than like 20% coffee grounds to your compost. I would definitely make sure you have like diverse material in there, kitchen scraps, landscape scraps and such. And you can also add it directly to the garden. But again, more is just a little bit of an amendment. I wouldn't, dump your coffee grounds out there every day. So
There's been a couple other questions about compost, and so I did want to
Thanks.
mention that. So Prescott Farmers Market is hopefully within the next 3 weeks launching our community compost project, which is in partnership with the City of Prescott. And we'll have a site where we'll have volunteers. We'll need volunteers to help build piles and turn piles, which would be a really great opportunity to come and learn about compost. So if you're interested in learning more about that, head to prescottfarmersmarket.org. And we'll have all events and volunteer opportunities up there in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be a really great opportunity. And you can also take your food scraps to the market, and we will compost them for you. And hopefully within the next 6 months, we'll have a bunch of compost to give to the community for free. So we're really excited. It's going to be a fun project, and we all need compost. So as Janet mentioned many times, it's very important. So we're really excited about that.
yeah, so excited.
Awesome. Somebody asked, are there certain vegetables you should or shouldn't plant next to each other? Yeah.
So what I'd recommend for that I guess referring to a companion planting chart would be useful. And I would write that down. You can look that up online. There's going to be certain plants that can be planted next to each other that do really well together. That might be that one is repelling pests because they don't like the smell, and then as far as plants being planted together that don't get along, they're going to be whether that's competing for light or so I would say looking at a companion planting chart would be useful. Beans and tomatoes don't do well together. Not quite together, but you don't plant beans after your garlic because of a certain compound that the garlic has within it that just makes the beans not grow. Yeah. So.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of questions.
Good. Yeah, keep them coming.
What's the best time to start seeds indoors?
It really depends on what you're starting. So right now would be a great time to start your peppers and eggplant inside. They're slow to start, but once they get growing in like a month or two, they'll really start to take off. But yeah, I would start those now if you haven't. Oh, you're not late, but those would do well now. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily start tomatoes right away because unless you have plenty of space for them, because, come end of April, they're going to be big and kind of wet, ready to go outside. I would start those more mid or end of March. Yeah.
What do you recommend starting from seed or plants?
It depends. So starting from seed, that'll be your peppers, your eggplants, your tomatoes. There are tons of flowers. You can start from seed indoor. Oh, start. Are they saying rather than transplants maybe? So I would, anything that really like grows up, I wouldn't start any carrots and root vegetables inside. I would direct seed those. But we'll go over all of that seed starting stuff as well. We'll go into more depth in that in a month.
Yeah, so and somebody asked about that too. The next program is March 27th at 3 p.m. So you can find it on the library's calendar. So same process. You'll click on the link to register, and then so 1 month, March 27th at 3 p.m. is all about seed starting. Let's see if there's any other.
Janet, can you mention about the Groundhog Day group again? Because I think that's a really great.
Yeah, and I was
on here.
Definitely. So this is a program that Molly Beverly has started, and I just saw in here that the date has been changed for that to the first. Let's see
I'll try to
here.
find that.
Cool. Thank you.
She
So
says second and fourth Tuesday.
Awesome, of each month. So that's a wonderful. Molly had this great idea of putting together a Zoom class. Anyone can participate. So you log in, and that's between 6:30 and 7:30 on Tuesdays. And so anyone in town, I don't know. I mean, I guess other people could join too. Can join that, and then Molly does announcements about slow food, and then she breaks everyone up into small groups. Yes, in the PM. And so you get grouped into small groups around 5 or 6 people, and it's all different levels. Some people have been gardening here for decades, others are brand new to gardening and just need some advice. And people ask questions, share advice, share stories. And honestly, it was so much fun last time we did that. And I encourage anyone who's gardening to jump in, because yeah, it's pretty fun to talk with people about gardening.
Somebody asked any suggestions on fabric pots, and are they immune to gophers?
So, okay, fabric pots can be useful, but I do find, just like how terracotta wicks the moisture out really quickly here, they can also do that. So I experimented with them a handful of years ago, and I was definitely up against, they needed a lot more water than a wooden bed. But that said, I would put them, if you're going to use them, in a shadier part of the garden. And what I did was I just cut out some hardware cloth and put it beneath it, because gophers do, I found out, chew through the bottom of the fabric planter pots, and so they can get into there. So I would line them also, but they can be useful for sure.
Okay. I think that may be all the questions. So here we go. Can you do a raised flower bed with cinder blocks?
Definitely. Yes, you certainly can.
But not food. Is that right?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any issue with food and the cinder blocks.
No.
Yeah, they're good to go. Yeah, you can use those to
The two
plant.
things I can think of that aren't good to do are railroad ties, which people do a lot of. I don't know if you mentioned it earlier. And
Yeah,
also tires. Sometimes people would say grow potatoes in tires, but they leach out a lot of chemicals. You don't want to do that.
any pressure treated woods you want to keep out of the garden. Yeah.
Okay. So just to wrap up here, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. And I can send you all that direct link along with the chat, because a lot of questions were answered in the chat as well. So I'll send you a transcript of that. And then, yeah, the next program, March 27th at 3 p.m. for seed starting. And the library will be open on Monday. And you can come check out the seed library. And someone asked, do you have to return them? No, they're yours to keep. We do check them out just to kind of keep a record of it. But they actually don't show up on your library account at all. So you don't need to return them. So thank you, Janet. Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody, for
Ruth.
joining us. And we hope to see you in the library soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.